the meeting to order of the Planning Commission. Just a few introductory remarks. The Planning Commission will consider those matters on the agenda tonight. I think a copy of the agenda should be outside if you haven't already found it. If you want to speak on any of the matters or on the public comment which begins the meeting, please fill out the little cards which are on the back of the seats. And then if you would give your copy to the clerk over here, she'll get it to us and we'll call on you. I want to make clear, if some of you may not have been here before, what our role is. We're the Planning Commission. We're not the Town Council. The Town Council is elected. We're appointed. The Town Council can make laws. We can't. We're supposed to interpret the laws and the facts. So that's a substantial difference. And sometimes when people make presentations to us, they forget that. So an applicant will normally have up to 5 minutes opening. The other speakers will have 3 minutes, and then the applicant will have 3 minutes, if needed, to respond. Before we start the meeting, we always invite public comment, and the public comment is not on a matter on our agenda. And no matter what the public comment is, we can't respond to it, so we just listen to it. It's free speech, so I want you to be aware of that. And the final thing is, if you have anything that makes noise, like a cell phone, if you would put it on vibrate or silence, we'd appreciate that. Now, all that housekeeping having been done, I would ask for the roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Erickson is excused tonight. Commissioner Jensen? Here. Commissioner Sayak? Here. Commissioner Machichi?
Here.
Commissioner Telesfor?
Here.
Vice Chair Bourgeois?
Here.
And Chair O'Donnell?
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Now, if we join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, and I'd ask Commissioner Jensen to lead us. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have next the minutes of May 13th. Are there any comments, or can I have a motion? Yes, Commissioner Telesfor.
Yeah, I don't have any comments, so I'd like to make a motion to approve the Planning Commission meeting action minutes from Wednesday, May 13th, 2009.
So second? And Commissioner Machichi?
I'm recusing myself. I was absent from that meeting. And
All right, thank you. We had a second, though. Is that correct? Yes, okay. Any other comments on the minutes?
I'm also going to be abstaining from the decision since I was recused from a portion of that meeting.
All right, so there will be, I guess, 3 of us left to vote.
4.
I guess I can't count. I'm sorry. 4 of us left to vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? And we have, I guess, 2 abstentions. That's right. Okay. And 1 commissioner who's not here. Any written communications?
No, other than a desk item that we'll discuss later on.
Okay. We have 1 desk item on 26 Alpine Avenue. And before we get to that, we'll take a moment to look at it. Some of us have had an opportunity, and perhaps some of us haven't. We have requested continuances for items 2 and 4 on the agenda. Can I have motions for those? Commissioner Sack?
I move to, excuse me, I'm sorry. I move to continue items 2 and 4, 15500 Francis Oaks Way, and 930 University Avenue to a date certain, the first being to June 24th, and the second also to June 24th.
Is there a
second?
Second. Okay. Commissioner Machichi. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? No. And no abstentions. All right. Are there any subcommittee reports? Yes.
I would just like to remind folks that there is a General Plan Advisory Committee meeting tomorrow night. If anyone is interested on participating in the General Plan update process, you can attend that meeting at 6 p.m. in the Neighborhood Center across the street.
Thank you. Okay. All right, so now it's verbal communications from the audience. I have one card, and that's Citizen Ray.
Yes, indeed. Nice to see our town manager here, and Sandy, #1 assistant, okay? Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to take the opportunity to complain strongly about the actions of Chairman O'Donnell at the last Planning Commission meeting. When as chairman, he tried, in my opinion, to take over the meeting. He tried to direct it to his point of view, okay? To the extent that when Mr. Erickson made a motion, he, the chairman, seconded the motion. Clear, unadulterated violation of the Brown Act. May I read? Under motions, this is the Brown Act. When a member wishes to propose an action be taken on an agenda item, the member must make a motion. The maker of the motion asks for recognition by the chair. After the individual is recognized, he or she will say, "I move that we." The chair cannot make a motion. Are you listening, Mr. O'Donnell? 3, the chair will ask if there is a second. Another member of the group must second the motion in order for it to be discussed. A second is made by saying, "I second the motion." The chair cannot second the motion. Okay? And what do we have? We have the minutes that were formally introduced tonight and accepted as correct. And states clearly, this man, this real estate attorney, is supposed to be here to serve the people, seconded the motion in violation of the Brown Act. How ugly can it be? Can't be any uglier. And do I go to the DA? I'll have to think about it, okay? Maybe he'll do some penance. Maybe he'll get his act together. Maybe he'll start serving the people instead of his clients, the developers, as a real estate attorney. Maybe. So we'll think about it, whether I go ahead with a formal complaint. Look at this idiot, nodding his head. He's in a dream world. Well, you know, if that's his attitude, if he wants to play head games with me over a Brown Act violation, then I will go to the district attorney for a cease and desist order on him. Ugly, ugly, ugly.
Your time is up, Citizen Ray.
Ugly.
Any other speakers or those who are wishing to exercise their First Amendment rights? Just by way of clarification and by way of the rules of procedure, I would ask the town attorney to comment on the chair making a second.
Well, first of all, the speaker was reading from something. I don't know what it was, but it wasn't the Brown Act. The Brown Act does not dictate rules of procedure. It merely speaks to the requirements of open meetings, agendas, and so on.
Just sit down, would you please?
As he said, he was reading from the Brown Act, and he was not. I don't know what he was reading from. And I was just quickly leaping through the commission policies and procedures. I can't find, and I'm not aware of any rule that prohibits the chair from seconding a motion. As a matter of fact, I believe that absent any other rules of procedure, the chair can both make a motion and second a motion in the event that nobody else has done so. So I don't think there was any violation of any rules of procedure that the commission is subject to as well.
However, I would say I would certainly welcome any investigation that the good citizen would like to launch. Now, if we can move forward, we have the consent calendar, and the first one is the Harwood Court matter. I guess the question there would be whether we want to take that off the consent calendar. If we don't, can we have a motion? Yes, Commissioner Jensen.
I move to approve the consent calendar, which consists of item number 119 Harwood Court, which is architecture and site application S-09-010 with the findings and conditions that's contained in the staff report.
Is there a second? Pardon me? Is there a second? Commissioner Machici seconded?
Yes.
Now, discussion? Then we call the motion. All those in favor? Aye. Is anyone opposed? So it carries unanimously. 5-0-1.
Excuse me, Chairman Aldon. We actually have a presentation that was before the consent calendar by Town Manager Greg Larson.
Okay, fine, thank you. I didn't see that.
That's okay.
All right, we have a presentation on the budget from the Town Manager. I'm sorry I didn't see that, so please go ahead and make your presentation.
Had a copy for citizens.
I didn't see, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. I will be glad after the presentation to go back. I'm still looking for it. I have 4 cards on item number 3. I had 1 card on public communication. Pardon me? Oh, okay. Well, we'll come back to you, okay? Yes, welcome.
Mr. Chair, members of the commission, I'm Greg Larson, Town Manager for the Town of Los Gatos. And this is my annual visit not only to the Planning Commission, but to most of our commissions to provide an update on town operations for the next year as reflected in the town's budget. As I said last year when I was here, the budget is the numerical representation of the town's goals and priorities, so the council has asked that we make this presentation to every commission so you're aware of the issues that the town and the council are facing in the year ahead. But first, I wanted to thank you in particular as the commissioners who put in the most time, not only in meetings, but at least an equivalent amount of time, if not twice as much outside of meetings, reviewing the materials and prepping for the meeting. So just thank you for your continued service to the town. It is much appreciated. You have in front of you a presentation that is largely reflective of what I presented to the council. I've added 1 additional slide that will be obvious when we get to it. And I apologize for the date. I do know it's the 27th, but I started preparing this yesterday on the slide. So to jump right into the presentation. Yes, sir.
Not sure we got.
Oh, there are copies to be passed down.
Okay.
Sorry.
I thought it was multiple page.
And Associate Planner Sandy Bailey has copies for the audience if they need it. So obviously there's been a worldwide economic crisis that has confronted us since the fall. We know that most residents and businesses have been impacted in the town of Los Gatos, and probably all of us know somebody who's been laid off, suffered a loss of income, or whose business activity has precipitously dropped since the economic events of early fall. That has come to the town of Los Gatos in a number of ways. First, for the first time in recent history, our actual revenues are down compared to the prior year, not just beneath budget, but actually beneath the prior year. So a real drop in revenues in 3 primary areas. Sales tax, down about $400,000, property tax down about $200,000, and development revenues, fees and charges for service down $900,000. So all 3 of those, 3 of our largest revenue streams, have dropped precipitously since the fall. Yet the cost of services are going up, largely due to contractual obligations that extend over many years, as well as increasing regulatory requirements, largely from the state government. However, Los Gatos is relatively strong due to the wise and conservative past fiscal actions of this council. Relatively is a relative term in that when we look at the jurisdictions around us, we see roughly half of the jurisdictions in Santa Clara County are looking at layoffs of actual current employees. Some are seeing reductions in their budgets of 10 to 15%. Significant reductions. As you'll hear later, we think we've come through this a little less difficult, but we still have our challenges. The good news is our challenges are almost exclusively isolated within the general fund. The challenge of that is that the general fund is what pays for our most basic services: police, library, parks, and streets. But it does not impact the separate funding streams for the police operations building, which will open this fall, for the new library, which will break ground early in winter, and for the sports facilities that were set aside by the council last year. We are also fortunate to have healthy reserves in place, both for our capital needs as well as for revenue stabilization in these uncertain economic times. We've also continued to focus on economic vitality, not just in our core, the downtown, but also along the Boulevard, University, Winchester, and the neighborhood shopping centers. And when the downturn hit in the fall, we were quick to respond with a hiring freeze and implementation of cost controls, which has more than offset the drop in revenue we've suffered this year as well. So we will be ending this year with a balanced budget, and the council has received and will be adopting a balanced budget for next year as well. But our 5-year forecast demonstrated that we needed to make about $2.5 million in adjustments over 2 years. That was a forecast we did in January. During the following 3 months, we learned we actually needed to make about $2.7 million in adjustments just for next year alone. So we've achieved that by the elimination of 9 vacant positions, saving roughly $900,000 when you include benefits. We've implemented other staffing and salary savings of $700,000, the lion's share of which comes from a management pay reduction that constitutes about $200,000, and non-management salary savings of roughly $250,000 that will either be achieved through furloughs or COLA reductions. We've also identified other operating cost reductions, utility bills and the like, for $600,000, and the smallest category is fee adjustments and transfers constituting $500,000, all of which totals $2.7 million in adjustments that the council reviewed a week and a half ago and will be approving Monday night. The actual overview of the budget is provided in relatively small print on the bottom of page 2, but you can see our largest source of discretionary revenue is sales and use taxes, followed by property taxes. Then licenses and permits and charges for services are not really discretionary. That pays for the services those fees pay for. So when you look at just our discretionary revenues and how those are used to provide our discretionary services, basically half of our sales tax and half of our property tax goes to pay for police. The balance goes to pay for libraries, streets, and parks. And that's where our direct delivery of services come from, is the discretionary tax revenue. Moving to the next page, along with the budget, we provided an updated 5-year forecast looking ahead for what does the adoption of this budget mean. And we're assuming in that 5-year forecast a slow recovery to 5% growth in years 4 and 5. This year we're seeing basically flat growth. Next, for this year 2, we're assuming flat growth. Year 3, we're assuming 3% growth in revenues, and after that, 5%. Optimistic about an economic recovery occurring within the first 2 to 3 years of this recession. We also have demonstrated, just to show the impact, what the loss of Netflix revenue would mean in year 5. We are in no way projecting the loss of Netflix revenue in year 5. We just want to get our arms around what that impact would be. Fortunately, we have continued a past practice of setting aside half of all Netflix sales tax revenue for economic reserves and our capital project needs, which means we're not living on it for our day-to-day services. So when Netflix goes away, we'll only have to cover half of that gap. And again, we don't plan on Netflix ever going away. We're proud to have them as a business in our community, and we work closely with them. But with the advent of digital streaming, business model changes, business acquisitions, we can never count on any single taxpayer to be with us forever. So we're trying to be conservative in planning for that revenue to eventually change in our forecast. We've also included known salary and benefit cost increases that have been contractually obligated, and the PERS portfolio also suffered a loss in the fall. That's the investment fund managed by the state that controls basically all public sector pensions. And when the stock market fell, the value of that portfolio fell as well by over 25%. We anticipate they will likely try to recoup some or most of that loss, starting with rate hikes to local jurisdictions in year 3. And we've built that into our projection as well. The result is that even with the $2.7 million in corrections the council will likely approve Monday for next year's budget, we anticipate needing to make continuing adjustments of about $1 million more each year for the next 4 years following that. So it's difficult times for local government. I don't think any more difficult than families and businesses are facing throughout Silicon Valley. And we're trying to do our share by reducing the cost of service delivery and targeting those services that need to be provided to our community to maintain Los Gatos as the place we all love. I wanted to highlight for you a number of particular impacts I see regarding the work you do as a commission. First, the revenue drop in fees and charges means that we have fewer applications coming in. Several council members have commented that about the Planning Commission meeting that was canceled a month or two ago, that's the first time that's happened in years. And I think that's another indicator of the drop in development activity that's coming. It also means that 2 of the vacant positions we've eliminated are in the Community Development Department. And that work has either gone away through the reduced application levels, or in code enforcement, it's been redistributed to the building inspectors. So 2 of the vacant positions of the 9 we've eliminated have been in CDD. Second, the council has supported staff recommendation to continue our focus on economic vitality. One of the vacant positions we're not eliminating is the economic vitality manager. And in fact, I've made an offer to somebody who we borrowed and now have stolen from the city of Mountain View, who many of you know may have stolen or did steal Randy Suda from us, so it's tit for tat. And Jessica Von Bork will be starting this Friday as our economic vitality manager. Fortunately, that's largely funded out of redevelopment funds, and so it doesn't impact the general fund. 3, we are continuing the general plan process. That is a high priority for the council and the town staff. I was very appreciative of Commissioner Bourgeois' mention of the meeting tomorrow night. We also have our 3rd community forum coming up on Saturday, June 6th from 11 to 1 in the neighborhood center, in the large hall at the neighborhood center. And that'll be a hands-on mapping exercise where we encourage the community to come and start seeing how the 4 issues the council has targeted, recreation, seniors, youth, and environmental sustainability, can start getting translated into land use and development design issues and thinking. Fourth, we are continuing the reduced counter hours for the planning permit counter as well as the finance counter. We have not received much public comment during our pilot period, and it really isn't leading to direct savings. It's leading to better workload management. The staff knows till 1 o'clock they'll be interrupted to handle clients that come in the door, and they'll have focus time every afternoon to deal with the larger applications so they're not clogging up the counter time. as well as to do staff work, research, site visits, and the like that are necessary for every report that comes to you. We have increased permit fees, not just by the standard CPI index that we usually apply every year, but we've done an analysis of overhead costs and saw that we were not charging overhead, facilities, finance time, HR time, my time spent on planning issues as part of the fee process. So we did an extraordinary 5% increase to fees to cover a portion of the overhead costs. And we're also going to be doing a comprehensive fee study next year to set those rates at what's appropriate and looking at our comparable jurisdictions nearby to make sure we're calculating the appropriate fee levels. Then last, the council approved a staff recommendation that in general, we're going to try to reduce commission workloads. Planning Commission is not one the council has asked to consider reducing their meeting schedule. Your workload is driven by the applications that come in. But the Library Commission for years has met on a quarterly basis, and that seems to have worked for library services. Could some of our other commissions move from monthly and sometimes twice monthly meetings down to quarterly or every other month meetings? And we're going to be looking at those issues because for many commissions outside of the Planning Commission, we find the frequency of their meetings often takes them out of policy work and into hands-on volunteerism, which really isn't well done in a Brown Act setting. That's best done through community unity, and we'll be working with the other commissions on that over the next year. I've also provided the last page, but wasn't planning to discuss it with you unless you had questions. The 2 slides we presented to the council on the capital improvement program. You received a separate item on that 2 meetings ago and didn't feel it needed special attention with you tonight. That concludes my budget overview. Would love to take any questions or comments you have.
Are there questions? Commissioner Bourgeois.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. I appreciate the presentation and the handout. On your slide showing the impacts to the Planning Commission,
Yes.
I know the General Plan Committee seems to have its hands full with the General Plan update and the housing element update. And I noticed you had on there completion of the North 40 specific plan. So is that something else that's going to, because that's kind of been on hold for the past year or so, is that something that's going to come back up?
We actually took the North 40 specific plan as a discussion item to the council last August, about 9 months ago, and the council directed staff to complete what are viewed as the changes needed to implement prior council direction and to bring it back to council as soon as possible. Obviously, any change like that would also go through the Planning Commission on its way to the council. What we're now looking at doing, and the council will be considering this in August, is to use the same consultant that's working on the general plan update to work on the North 40, finishing the specific plan, and then to roll the EIR process in together, largely because it saves a considerable amount of money. Instead of doing 2 separate EIRs that would look at the same issues, to try to do a single EIR process.
Want to follow up?
Yeah, just a quick follow-up on that same bolt. Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate that. You also have implementation of the Boulevard plan. I was curious what that meant for us as far as implementation of that plan.
I think the council will clearly talk about this probably some Monday as they review your prior discussion on the Gateway project, 15400 Los Gatos Boulevard. The council had a study session on the Boulevard plan 4 months ago, and felt they had given sufficient direction to staff that basically they reaffirmed the Boulevard plan and want to move forward on the implementation components of that as needed. Some of that includes public infrastructure financing and physical assets, some right-of-way reviews, some viewshed reviews and corridor analysis, as well as supporting the individual projects that are coming through the pipeline as part of our economic vitality efforts.
And Commissioner Machichi, did you have a question?
Out of curiosity, Netflix revenue? About what size is that?
Sales tax information from individual proprietors is confidential information, and is confidential. I will tell you it constitutes roughly 25% of our sales tax revenue.
Okay.
They have authorized disclosure of that information.
Thank you.
So, any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes, Chair.
We've all been reading about the state's problems, and that the state is going to be taking, I don't know how you properly phrase it, but I will say taking money back or not giving money to various governmental groups, including this town. And the newspaper reports a rather substantial sum of money. I'd like to know exactly how that fits into the budget.
It's a great question. I think many people might call it theft. I'll try to use softer language. It's an involuntary loan that the state is taking as allowed under Prop 1A that was approved by the voters. The 8% of property tax would constitute roughly $950,000 from the town of Los Gatos. As allowed under the old Prop A, they can borrow it for 3 years and have to repay it with interest. We learned today of another potential taking that the state is considering, which is our gas tax revenue, which for the town of Los Gatos is roughly $550,000, which largely pays for our street repairs. So it could decimate some of our street repair program over the next year. So the town council, when they reviewed the budget a week and a half ago, adopted a resolution calling on the state not to look at local government to solve their problems, and to not further pass down any unfunded mandates that local government doesn't have the resources to meet.
But your budget projections, do they take into account the $900,000?
The $950,000, what we recommended to council, because that literally broke the Friday before the council meeting, that's what we would use our reserves for. Because it is a loan, it would take a vote of the public to let the state not treat it as a loan. So for now, we think we're safe in viewing it that they would have to repay it in 3 years with some modicum amount of interest, and we would replenish our reserve at that point in time. There is always the chance the state could propose to the voters a ballot measure that eliminates the loan repayment requirement, but I'm sure not many cities would support that.
Are there other questions of the town manager?
So,
thank you very much for the presentation. All right, the next matter we have, and I had promised you, pardon me, I don't know which of these cards is yours, but if you want to speak on a particular agenda item, you will be called. If you wanted to speak in the general public comments, okay, thank you, then you will be called in due course. So the next matter is the 26 Alpine Avenue, public hearing number 3. I ask for a staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Associate Planner Sandy Bailey will be presenting the project.
Thank you, Chairman O'Donnell and members of the Commission. I would like to remind you that you do have a desk item on this item, and for the general public, there's a copy of this desk item right over here. The subject lot is 20,271 square feet and is elevated above the street level of Alpine Avenue and Jackson Street. The lot is challenging to develop due to the steep slope, which averages about 37%, and due to the location of trees in the creek. The subject property is the remaining undeveloped lot of a 3-lot subdivision, which was approved by the Planning Commission in 1991. During the course of the subdivision hearing, there were several concerns raised regarding the future development of the site, and these concerns included grading, tree, privacy impacts, creek impacts, and the house sizes. The size of the future homes was a concern since at that time the town did not have FAR reduction requirement for sloping lots. Therefore, the allowed FAR at that time would have allowed a significantly large house, which really could not be accommodated on the lot. The Commission determined that the allowed square footage for the lot should be 2,500 square feet. The Commission actually did a good job in that analysis because based on current FAR requirements, the FAR for a sloping lot for this site would be 2,633 square feet. So that was a pretty good judgment call there. The applicant is requesting approval to construct a 2,500 square foot multi-level residence with a 1,382 square foot cellar and a 740 square foot attached 3-car garage. The plans were reviewed by the town's consulting architect, the geotech, and arborists, and the project has been designed and conditioned to meet all their concerns. Due to the average slope of the lot, the project was required to have an environmental review, and you have a copy of that initial study and negative declaration. Since the guidelines and standards for land use near streams was adopted prior to the project being deemed complete, as part of the environmental review, the town requested the environmental consultant to obtain a biological consultant to determine the location of the riparian corridor and the top of bank. And that is analyzed in your initial study as well. Based on the determinations made by the biologist, the applicant was required to make some minor modifications to the setbacks to meet the standards. Although the site is sloped, it is located outside of the town's defined hillside area. The application is technically not subject to our current residential design standards since the standards were adopted after the plans were deemed complete. But we did review the plans using the applicable hillside development standards. As noted in your report, there is no development site on the property that is located within the least restrictive development area. The applicant has also designed the house within the slope of the hillside in an attempt to reduce the mass of the structure. But by doing so, that results in cuts, which exceeds what is recommended by the hillside development standards. So although you could design a house to reduce the graded cuts and fills, the commission would need to note that the house cannot be designed to totally meet the cuts and fills. The front of the house has a low profile and has been designed within the slope of the hillside to reduce the mass of the structure. Staff does have concerns, though, with the mass and scale of the right side elevation, which may be visible from Jackson Avenue or Jackson Street. The intent of the seller policy is to encourage hidden square footage in lieu of visible mass. It is questionable if substantial efforts have been made to reduce the visible mass of the right side elevation. An alternative to reduce the mass of the house is to reduce its length. The house could also be designed to be pushed towards the southern property line, which would set it more into the hillside, which is where the flat portion of a patio area is proposed. If that is an alternative that is recommended to be pursued, though our town consulting arborist would need to review those revised plans to determine how far the house could be pushed toward that hillside because there's 2 large oak trees in that vicinity. In addition, the turreted stairway element, which has been determined to be sympathetic to the architectural style of the house, appears to add to the mass due to the elongation of that element. And so an alternative design to that may also help reduce the mass. Staff also has a concern with the mass of the 9-foot-high retaining wall in the auto court area. Staff recommends that the proposed 3-car garage be reduced to a 2-car garage, and that the backup distance from the garage be reduced to 25 feet, which is the minimum required by town code. By reducing the size of the garage and the backup area, the height of that retaining wall would range from 1 feet to 7 feet, as opposed to the 2 feet to 9 feet. Another possibility is to modify the location of the garage so that it comes in directly off of Alpine Avenue. The only concern with that is then the majority of the front elevation would consist of the garage. So those are the 2 alternatives you would need to consider. Included with your original report in the desk items are 2 letters from concerned neighbors, and there's also a petition in support of the project. The desk item includes a condition of approval if the project is approved, to mitigate one of the neighbors' concerns regarding construction schedules and notifying the neighbors on Alpine Avenue and within the vicinity of what the construction schedule is. That includes staff's presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
Are there questions? Yes, Commissioner Sayak?
Thank you, Ms. Bailey, for your report. You had mentioned the cut and fill issue, and I was hoping you could just speak a little bit more and help me reconcile the cut and fill issue that it sounds like needs to happen regardless of house size. But in the commission notes that was an attachment, I believe it is 12 or 13, one of the conditions that was applied to this project was that it has to comply with the hillside standards for cut and fill. So can you just reconcile how we can meet that condition?
It's a condition of approval, or
I believe so. It was in the minutes, the Planning Commission minutes from 1991.
Well, actually, in 1991, our hillside development standards were about 5 pages long, and it basically said to reduce grading impacts, there were no cut and fill requirements at that time.
There were no specific numbers that we had to meet.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Bourgeois?
Thank you. That was one of my questions. I'd actually like to go through the conditions of approval for the subdivision. And the first one says that proposed houses will have an upper limit of 2,500 square feet. And so staff has concluded that is exclusive of a cellar.
That is what staff has interpreted, yes.
And that's based on some previous...
The 2 other houses in that vicinity of that subdivision exceeded the 2,500 square feet, and plus town policy is to exclude cellars for FAR calculation.
But they exceeded the 2,500 square feet because of the cellar? Or in addition, if you take the cellar out of the equation, they still exceeded 2,500 square feet?
We do not have the specifics on the cellar dimensions for those lots.
Okay. So we don't know if that exceeding 2,500 is inclusive or exclusive of the cellar. We don't know that.
That is correct.
Okay. So the second condition of approval was there will be no removal of specimen trees. And I tried to look up what is meant by a specimen tree, and I couldn't find that. Could you help me out?
Based on what our current consulting arborist does in evaluating trees for removal, there's 3 different categories, and the specimen trees would be considered the trees that are highly suitable for retention and preservation for the site. And those trees designated as high are basically due to the health of the tree, the structural condition of the tree, and let's see if there's anything else. And that it contributes to the site. It provides a contribution to the site. So when the arborist reviews tree removals, he does note their rating there. And none of the trees proposed to removal are rated with a high preservation.
And so that's how we as a town define if something is a specimen tree? Or
That's how we interpreted that condition to be met.
Okay. And I would note that there is 1 tree, maybe 2, that were high that aren't being removed, but they're being relocated. Is that correct?
The applicant has redesigned the plan, so those trees don't have to be relocated, and they will be remaining.
Okay. And then one more question on the trees. There were 15 to be removed, 12 of which require mitigation, 3 of which are a hazard, therefore there's only 9 that require mitigation. When I look at the plans, we don't have a landscape plan in front of us, and I look at 9 large trees that need mitigation, which I believe could be anywhere from 2 to 6 replacement trees. Is there even room on site to mitigate all these trees?
If there is no room, their town code has a fund that the money goes into. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Jensen?
I just have a clarification on Commissioner Bourgeois' question. On page 2 of the staff report, it says background. At the very bottom of the page, it says the commission should note that pursuant to the State Subdivision Map Act, these types of conditions referring to the 2,500 square foot limit, etc., to restrict development of the site cannot be imposed. So does that mean, what does that mean for the 1991 subdivision restrictions from the Planning Commission? Do we use them as a guide? Are they meaningless? What
You
do
would
we
use
do?
them, and maybe Ori wants to, okay. You would use them as a guide. So during the architecture and site review process, we did analyze those. We consider them directions and work towards meeting those as directions. And the applicant also complied with the square footage in meeting that direction.
Perhaps it would be helpful to have the town attorney also say something.
Well, those conditions were imposed, and they were accepted, and they were never challenged in the subdivision. So arguably, they're enforceable in this context, though they really shouldn't have been imposed. And I wouldn't want to see them challenged at this point in time as subdivision conditions that were inappropriately imposed and are being imposed on this project. However, I do think that they very clearly reflect issues in the neighborhood, all of which are within the Commission's discretion under the code to take into consideration in reviewing an A&S application. So whether you consider them directive or not, I think they're very clearly relevant issues.
Are there other questions? I have a question, but I'll defer and somebody else has a question. The question I guess I have is, having looked at this and having seen that the town architect looked at it, and supposedly everything the town architect suggested, I think it says they did, except that the consulting architect had some concerns which were not really defined, that the right side of the building might be too massive, I think was what I remember reading, and left that to the town. And now when I read the staff report, I take it the staff also feels that the right side of the building and, for example, the retaining wall are too massive. And we'll develop this, I think, as the evening goes, but it sounds like we're saying go back and don't make it so massive and maybe reduce the height of that wall. Does staff, I just didn't find that particularly helpful to us. Are we saying let's let them just come back and we'll look at something, or do you have any specific thoughts in mind? You've described to us what they might do with the retaining wall, the 9-foot high retaining wall, and the turret. But are there other thoughts that have been discussed or considered?
Yes, the house could be, the length of the house could be reduced, or the house could be pushed towards the southern property line and be pushed further into the hill, but by doing so, that would increase the grading quantities.
So all of the things that you did discuss those earlier, and each possible solution of bulk and mass apparently has some price for it, which might be more grading or putting a garage on Alpine as opposed to around the corner. So there doesn't seem to be any particularly easy way to do it.
That's correct.
Okay, all right. That's why we're here. Okay, yes,
I just
Mr.
have
Telesworth.
one follow-up question. In the staff report, and by the way, it was a very thorough staff report. I really appreciate all the work on this. It says under grading and geotechnical, a retaining wall ranging, referring to that, to 2 to 9 feet is proposed. And then it said the applicant worked with the town staff to reduce the heights of these walls to be in compliance. And what is that reduction?
Those are the walls on the southern property, the southern property line. Those are 2 5-foot retaining walls that run along the southern property line to create the flat patio area.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, I'll open the public hearing and call on the people who would like to speak. And the first name I have is, hopefully pronounce this correctly, Pamela Nerney. Do you have an applicant? Oh, I'm sorry. It's not your turn. I made one very serious mistake. The applicant's here. I apologize. Could we have the applicant speak?
Yes, my name is Barry Barnes. Just as a outline, you have the letter I sent along with the letter of justification, I guess they
Mr.
call it.
Barnes, could you give us your address, please?
115 Mill Court, Los Gatos, California.
Thank you.
We've been working on this project for just over 5 years. We've gone through all the town's consultants, the architectural consultant, the arborist, the geotechnical, the riparian habitat. We've gone through them all. Every requirement that they have come up with, we have addressed in our plan. We haven't argued any condition. Architectural review wanted us to take off the round stairway and make it the hexagon stairway that it is today. Staff wanted us to take off the chimneys. We took off the chimneys. We've designed the house to the town's consultants. We're in an R120 zone. We're not in a hillside zone. We meet all the requirements of the town, setbacks, height, anything they came up with, we've addressed. We've limited the grading on the site because we fit the house into the hill. We're going to put a mat foundation on it, so there's no grading for digging down. The retaining wall for the auto court is an Allen wall, so you don't have to go outside the footprint of the actual driveway. To stay within the arborist report, we have to do any grading beyond the footprint of the house by hand. So we've reduced anything that has to go beyond that point. We've kept the house, even though it's a downhill lot, we've kept it to a 2-story. We have not had to stretch it down the hill by tucking it into the hill. We've kept it to a 2-story house. I know up the hill, up the street right behind us at 55 Oak Hill, they came in here in September of last year with another view from a downhill lot. They had a 3-story elevation on the downhill side. They got approved even though they had the mass that staff says I have. The problem with a downhill lot is you're going to have a mass on one side. We've tried to tuck it into the hill and keep it covered by the trees enough that the downhill site is pretty much minimal. I think if you've been to the site, you've seen the story poles, and they're very hidden by the canopies of all the trees. There's so many trees on that lot that, as one commissioner says, I don't see how I could plant anymore. We've stayed within the consistency of the neighborhood. We've tried to keep the house so it'll fit in, so it's not going to stick out. We have no street parking in the whole length of our lot. Both sides are red. So we need the auto court to get some off-street parking. The neighbors up and down the street, they don't like cars parked off and on all the time. We need to get the cars off the street. Staff is saying maybe turn the garage towards Alpine. We've looked at that. If I turn the garage towards Alpine, as staff says, it's going to look like a house with a big garage. The back of the garage would be elevated 12 feet off the ground. I'd have a 12-foot retaining wall. Right now with the driveway, I'd have 9. My driveway is an alum block. It's going to be hidden its natural colors. It will disappear. A concrete wall coming down off the bottom of a garage wouldn't. The rear court that staff is saying shove the house into, I've already eliminated. We had another room back in there that was a dug-in room. We've eliminated that room. With Public Works, they were concerned with the grading. We've eliminated it. If she wants me to shove it back in there again, I'm going to triple my grading. It's a difficult house, a difficult lot. We have fit the house into the lot extremely well. We've kept the grading down to a minimal and the height to a minimal, but it is a downhill site on one side. So after 5 years, I think we've worked with staff and everybody else, and we'd like to get the project moving forward.
All right, let's see if there are questions. Are there questions? Yes, Commissioner Jensen.
Thank you for your presentation. My question goes to not the location of the garage, but whether you would consider making it a 2-car garage, and if not, why not?
If the way the garage sits right now, when we worked it through Public Works on the grading coming in, to keep the retaining wall down to 9 feet, the driveway is going to come in and drop down in. To get into the first garage stall, you're going to have to back up and actually pull around to get into it. If you reduce it to 2, I don't know where she would put the second one, but you would eliminate. It's not going to assist getting in because the first one is so difficult to get into anyway.
Can I follow up?
Yes, please.
Then I don't understand why making it bigger makes any difference, because you're talking about turnaround. So what I'm curious about is, wouldn't making it a 2-car garage reduce the length or the size or the cut or the auto court portion? And
the only portion that we could reduce would be the front garage, the one closest to Alpine. And so the 2-car would be next to that. And if you reduce that one, it's not going to do anything to the house. I mean, I can I can reduce it, but it won't do anything to the house.
Yes, Commissioner Bourgeois.
Just to follow up on that, So I assume you have the same concern as for the reduction in the turnaround space. We're talking about reducing that to the minimum, which I believe was 20 or 25 feet. I'm assuming you don't want to do that because then you have trouble pulling into the garage, or?
No, it's just that if I have one car off the street, pulls off the street, because, again, we have no parking. If one car pulls off the street and parks in the driveway, I can still get out of it. If I don't, if I bring it down to the 25 feet, you have no off-street parking and be able to get out of your own garage.
Gotcha. So actually, my real question was, I wanted you to expand a little bit on what you said about the rear room that you removed, that staff engineers had some concern about the grading. I didn't quite follow that.
Behind the garage, we had a storeroom that went way back. It was actually underneath the dining room. That went straight down as a basement. And it didn't, I could have done it for square footage because it didn't count. But it was too much grading. Public Works was concerned with the retaining walls and everything else, so I just eliminated it.
So it was a portion of the cellar.
Yes.
But I believe the comment from staff was pushing the house back into the patio space.
That would require excavating that area behind the family room and the downstairs area.
It's not being graded already to create the patio?
No, it's not. The patio is second story.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions of the applicant? Thank you, sir. You'll have an opportunity to respond after everyone talks. As I originally said, the first speaker card I have is for Pamela Nernan.
Hi, good evening. I live at 47 Alpine Avenue with my husband and my two 14-year-olds. We've lived there for 11 years, and I don't have all the information on this project. Don Perry, the realtor who has provided you for the applicant, as I understand it, a lot of neighbor input, gave us a postcard we received it Thursday prior to Memorial Day weekend, asking us to come by and review the plans. So that wasn't exactly designed for a big show up. I know I personally talked to 8 or 10 of the neighbors, and they couldn't go by on Saturday. And I think there's a lot of confusion on whether or not this is actually a fait accompli, if it's a done deal, or if there is an opportunity. I don't want to waste anybody's time. If there's no opportunity if this is going to get approved one way or the other, if there's going to be a big house where we've grown to appreciate trees and shade and everything else that's there, then I don't want to waste your time.
I think I can simply say this matter is before us for consideration. I can't tell you what the commission is going to do because we haven't.
Oh, so they haven't done it yet?
Oh, we haven't done
Okay,
it, no.
all right. Well, it's been going on for 18 years, as you may have heard. I did send an email to Ms. Bailey as soon as I found out there was going to be a meeting tonight. And, you know, it's the reason there's been, my understanding, and I've lived there again for 11 years, and I've known people who have lived there much longer, is because of all the problems that you're hearing about, because of the slope, because there's no parking in front of the house. And by the way, there is no parking in front of that house because it is on a very dangerous curve. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the site or you've actually seen the site, but Alpine is a very narrow street. And for the last 2 years, several of us on the street have been working closely with Sergeant Langer, the town manager, Mr. Larson, several people within the town to deal with the parking and speeding issues that we have on the street from both the businesses, especially the beauty parlor, and the high school, to mitigate all of that. And between the speeding but the parking got really out of control because, as we've told the town council several times, as soon as one car is parked on one side, it becomes a one-way street. So that's why there's no parking in front of 26 Alpine, as well as the other homes. And, you know, I've seen this lot on sale at least twice while I've lived there, and nothing ever happened. And I call the real estate agents, and I ask how much, and why isn't it selling, what's going on? And you get the litany of things that I see here. And I'm sure that, is it Mr. Barnes, has worked very hard, obviously, for 5 years. It's his lot. He should be able to do what he wants with his lot. But I think it's a very anomalous situation. It's not just that I'm a tree hugger or because I like some open space on my street. I'm very concerned about all the things in the history of this project and the reason why it's been turned down historically by this commission, not you members specifically, but by others. And I'm concerned that it would be...
Let me stop you for 1 second. The buzzer, I think, should have gone off. It's malfunctioning. That's not your fault. Why don't you take another 30 seconds and just finish up?
All right. So the traffic issue and the parking issue is a pretty big deal. The construction phase, which I informed Ms. Bailey about, is where are all those construction trucks? If this is, again, a foregone conclusion, how is that construction going to be managed? There's no place to park. There's no place to put the trucks. I picture all the trucks and the cement trucks and the diggers and everything else in front of our homes, parked on our sidewalks. And I'm not sure, because he's not building it for himself, as I understand it, he's building it to sell. So it's not like he has an equity in the future of the neighborhood.
Now, don't sit down yet. We'll see if there are any questions for you. And before we do that, let me have a show of hands for those of us who've gone out and looked at the property. Okay, so we all have looked at the property.
Okay.
Now, are there questions of the speaker? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next card I have is, I'm not sure if this is a sequence that I ought to be in, Robert Pollock.
How do you do? My name is Robert Pollock, and I'm here to address any concerns you might have about site development pertaining to geotechnical considerations, that type of thing.
Are you appearing for the applicant?
Yes.
I think it would make more sense perhaps if we let everyone else speak first, because then our questions perhaps might be better formed. So if you don't mind, I think I'll ask others to speak. I have a card for Susan Corey.
Hi, I'm Susan Corey. I actually live at 38 Alpine Avenue, which is the adjacent property to 26, even though the numbers don't really work together. But we are the house that's directly attached to this, that shared the common driveway for a while. And what I want to tell you is my husband and I have dealt with Barry for a long time, because he's been really great about getting in touch with us, letting us know what's going on. He's addressed every issue that we've had concerning the property, and we are the ones directly affected in terms of proximity to our home, everything having to do with the tree removal, everything. And you know what we have found? We fully support this project completely, believing that anyone who is able to buy a piece of buildable property in Los Gatos should be allowed to build this property. I understand neighbors' concerns about we like the tranquility of our neighborhood. Do you know what happens is when you do have property for sale, it will be sold at some point. So work with somebody to get something done that actually is aesthetically pleasing to the street, builds into the hillside. It looks wonderful. Again, we are the ones that are directly affected. We have absolutely no problem whatsoever with the plans in this existing form. The way it is right now is absolutely fine for us as the people who are absolutely, completely, most directly affected by this project. So we fully support it and hope that it goes through. We have no issues.
Let's see if there are any questions. Are there any questions of the speaker? Let me ask.
You've probably seen my house, actually. If you looked at the property, I'm literally the house right on the.
So you're up gradient from that?
Yeah, literally. We're right there.
Any questions? Thank you very much.
Yep.
Don Perry.
Hi, I'm Don Perry. Many of you know I'm the Vice Mayor of Monte Sereno, so I want to make it very clear right up front. I'm not here in any official capacity. I am the real estate agent, the aforementioned real estate agent that has worked with Barry Barnes for a number of projects over the last 3 or 4 years. And 2.5 years ago, I'm just here to tell you that he's done an exemplary job of outreach to the neighbors in the community. And I'm very happy that Mrs. Corey spoke before I did, because she had a number of concerns 2.5 years ago when I went and actually knocked on doors in the neighborhood and went up and down the street. And it's a testament to the fact that he's done he's bent over backwards to cooperate with the neighbors wherever possible. And sometimes it's just not possible. I understand that. But wherever possible, he's worked out, everything ahead of time. And the plan has gone through multiple renditions during the 2.5 years that I've been involved with it to accommodate not only the town as items come up, and to accommodate different neighbors, especially the Corys, as their objections came up. So, with that in mind, I'm here, of course, to ask you to approve the plans. I know that if the plans had come to you 2.5 years ago, and then 2 years ago, and a year ago, and you had seen all these renditions, you might go, gosh, this guy has really done his work. He's really done everything he can to, work with everybody involved. And it is time to approve this, but he's gone through all these in the background, and now he's here tonight asking for approval, and so am I. Thank you.
Are there questions of the speaker? Thank you very much. The next speaker card I have is Citizen Ray.
Yes, my comments are as follows. As most of you know, my education, formal education, was as a fish and game biologist, okay? I never practiced because my wife could never stand living on a game refuge. But I'm practicing now, okay? I went down after reading the staff report, which was 100% silent on land use near creeks and streams, okay? And we all know from the Ross Creek matter that the town took this authority a year ago. A year ago! Well, we finally got a comment, thanks to Ms. Rooney. It says the final project has been modified to meet the adopted guidelines and standards for land use near streams, which were adopted prior to the project being deemed complete. Fine. But let's take a look and make sure that's a true statement. I have no idea, because there's nothing in the staff report other than that deals with it, okay? So, as a biologist, please continue this so we can take a look. I went by today and looked at this creek. There's a live running creek right down there in Jackson. And the story poles are right in what amounts to the riparian right-of-way. But in Los Gatos, there's never been a public policy adopted as to what a riparian right-of-way is all about, as is required by the land use document, okay? The town of Los Gatos has drug its feet for over a year, drug its feet prior to Ross Creek, and they got a lawsuit, and they're dragging their feet right now. But, Ms. Rooney is new, and she has to get up to speed, okay? So I'm going to give her an opportunity. So I hope you will, too, continue it, and then I'll have a chance to review the plans, the siting, and why we don't have a riparian policy as required by the law. Why don't we have it? Looney Tunes Lords never got around to doing it, okay? And for good reason. Because it's restrictive. So let's have a riparian policy on the table, Ms. Rooney, on the table, please. Thank you.
Are there any questions of the speaker? Thank you very much. The next speaker is Michael Cronk.
Good evening. Michael Cronk, 27 Jackson Street. As concerns this project, I am also directly affected. If you know, Jackson Street runs level and Alpine runs above it, so we're kind of low right to begin with. We are concerned with continue to be concerned about the mass and the 9-foot retaining wall. We're already below, it's already a good 10, 12 feet above us to begin with. So I agree with the staff's concerns. We have the same concerns. Also, in terms of the square footage, when you're talking about the cellar, C-E-L-L-A-R, I'm not real sure about what that means in terms of cellar. If it's completely visible, as it seems to be, how that can be considered a cellar, and it's part of the square footage. And lastly, the story poles that are up, I don't know that they accurately reflect or give a sense of what kind of mass we're talking about and how far out into the lot it comes toward our side. And also, I'd like to clarify 2 points that were sent, a transmittal from Don Perry on May 21st to Ms. Bailey, in which he said that in a conversation he had with me 2.5 years ago, that my only concern at the time was the large eucalyptus tree on the property line, the shared property line. No, that wasn't the eucalyptus tree I was talking about. There's a taller one right on where the driveway is. And I, at the time, expressed the concern because I had just removed a large eucalyptus tree next to my driveway, which the arbor said was going to split and cause a 90-foot tree. And I expressed the concern that if there was a development of that site, that they would have to remove, or seemingly they would have to remove that because it would either they couldn't build there or there would be a danger of that tree coming down. And then regarding the postcards that were sent out, that were sent to all the neighbors on the 21st, or inviting us to the 21st between 9 and 11 a.m. to view the site, we never got a card. We were never contacted. So, thank you.
Are there questions of the speaker? Yes, Commissioner Bourgeois.
Thank you, and excuse me if I got this wrong, but I believe in some of the materials I was reading, you were the neighbor that had concerns about the creek and flooding, or perhaps some sediment delivery to the creek, or yes. Could you expand on that a little bit and what your concerns are?
As I said, our lot is in a hollow or down below, and when there's heavy rains and it saturates the hill right beyond our fence, we have water that comes into our yard, and we had a flagstone patio part of it. We had to chisel that out so that it would have a place for that water to run down to the creek on Jackson. It comes off under our fence and through the hill.
And your concern for this new development in the context of flooding is? Well,
my understanding, part of looking at the plans, I think that driveway that they're talking about coming down comes right where almost right behind our backyard fence.
So you're worried about runoff, just delivering more water to that sensitive point?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Next speaker is Ann Walker.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Ann Walker, and I've lived in this area since 1962. I've been a real estate agent with Coldwell Banker for 13 years, which is about the same period of time that I've been working as a real estate agent for the applicant, Barry Barnes. As you may know, Mr. Barnes has about 40 years of construction experience. He's built many, many homes in many local communities. As his agent, I've observed his dealings with neighbors near some of these projects. He makes a lot of effort to communicate with them. One of the ways he's communicated with the neighbors about this particular project is that we mailed a postcard last week to 34 neighbors. And I'd like to personally apologize to Mr. and Mrs. Kroc for not sending a postcard. That was my personal oversight, so I apologize. This postcard contained contact information for Mr. Barnes. Mr. Barnes wanted to open communication with the neighbors. Also, it contained contact information for me and for Mr. Barnes' other real estate agent, Don Perry. It invited the neighbors to an informal gathering this past Saturday at the property, where some people asked questions and expressed their concerns. Overall, everyone was very positive and supportive. I feel that the neighbors of this project are very fortunate to have such a cooperative and communicative project manager. During the years I've worked with Mr. Barnes, I've also seen that he's extremely cooperative with development officials at the various different cities that he works with. He basically says yes to everything that they ask of him, unless it's something that's extremely unworkable. And in my opinion, I think he's overly cooperative, and I've told him this. So I'm very surprised that after 5 years of him working with the town of Los Gatos on this project, he still doesn't have approval to build a house on this lot. And the prior owner had been working on this lot since 1993. So I feel that after 16 years of delays, it's time for this parcel to have approval for a house to be built there. I ask the commission to approve this house as designed by the applicant, Mr. Barnes. Thank you.
Are there questions of the speaker? Thank you very much. The next card I have is Bjorn Allblad. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Bjorn Allblad. I live at 19 Alpine, where I've lived for the past 21 years with my family. I'm very gratified to see a project of this magnitude going forward in our community. It's an asset both to Los Gatos and certainly to our small neighborhood. I think especially in this time of economic difficulty where people are pulling back on their projects, it's great to see something as ambitious as this going ahead. I have no doubt that the building phase is going to create a lot of consternation for the neighbors. We're going to be directly affected. We live across the street. And there are going to be a lot of gravel trucks and other vehicles that will be creating some problems and so on. And that's absolutely correct. However, it's part of the package of progress, and it'll soon be over. We'll have a very nice building and an asset to Alpine Avenue. Thank you very much.
Are there questions of the speaker? Thank you very much. All right, the last card I have is Mr. Pollock, who is an engineer, as I understand it, who worked for the applicant, and I'll ask you to come forward, please. You can come forward, please. You can make a presentation, or we can simply ask you questions if any of the commissioners have questions.
I don't have a presentation. I'm just here to answer questions if you have any.
Okay, and could you, just for the record, give us your business address?
634 Santa Cruz Avenue.
All right, thank you. Are there questions? This is a chance to, this gentleman is an engineer on the project. Yes, Commissioner Bourgeois.
Thank you. I guess the bottom line is, this is a steep slope. There's a small fault at one side of the property. With this type of foundation and the proposed project, do you think it's stable?
This project will make it more stable than it is now. That's certain.
Okay, thanks.
Let me have a follow. Oh, pardon me, Commissioner Machichi. Well, yes, it's loosely phrased. It's a follow-up. I was curious. The last speaker, I think, or maybe the speaker before, was talking about drainage, and I was curious. I understand the problem before the building is built. I understand his concern with the driveway, but it wasn't clear to me which way the drainage is designed and whether the plan as drawn would actually lessen the discharge down the hill or not.
I did not do the drainage design. I did geotechnical. So I'm more concerned with the grading and the foundation design and that type of thing, the retaining walls. However, with this much work being done on a site, it's difficult for me to imagine the drainage not being improved in the process. We should be able to easily improve it, actually.
Another question. The staff had made some suggestions as to potential mitigation, one of which was to move the building back into the area of the parking plaza or open area there. And the applicant said that would require substantially more excavation and removal. Could you describe that to us?
It would require, if you went back into the hill farther, you'd have to remove more of the hill, and you'd also end up with bigger retaining walls at the back. I don't see it as a virtue at all from my point of view.
Okay, just to be very simplistic about it, I guess I visualized an open area, which is where the cars could park, And if it's going to be there, how far back into the area that has to further be excavated are we talking about? I thought perhaps it was going back into the area where the parking is going to be otherwise.
Well, you're going to have to go back into that hill no matter what. So if you go back into the hill farther, obviously you're going to have to excavate more. There's just no way around it.
Okay, Commissioner Bourgeois?
Can I get clarification from staff on that point? Because it was my understanding, what I understood from the applicant was that they would need more grading if they were going to extend the cellar portion of the project into that area, whereas what I thought staff was saying is just extend the second floor further back into the hill, which would not require more grading. What am I missing?
Well, actually, that's another alternative. Basically, it was to push the house towards the southern property line, and that would be another option, is the second floor, pushing it back. The other one would be just the entire house, pushing it back. And it would be into the flat patio area that we were talking about at the southern property line.
Not the driveway.
Correct.
Yeah.
So is there a question to the speaker? All right. Was there a question down here?
She has.
All right. We have no other questions. I want to thank you.
Thank you.
And now I would ask the applicant to come up and say anything he'd like to for 3 minutes, up to 3 minutes.
I think if I can show you on the plan what the staff is talking about moving the house.
Sure. If you want to take the microphone with you, just pull it right out, it'll come. And if you would just come back here, you can do that. So the record should reflect he's walking back to the wall behind us where the drawings are.
On the floor plans, staff is recommending A2 and A3. Staff is recommending to shrink the house in this direction and move it into this direction. To shrink this part, you'd have to shrink this part. And she's saying move it into this direction. That moves this back into here. This becomes another 10-foot retaining wall. You're losing a bedroom here, and you're losing a bedroom here. This is the only yard that this hillside has. It's this little courtyard. If this had been designed in the beginning to do away with that and put a house back into here, we would have had decks out here. And that would have made this mass from this view much worse. And that's why I designed it this way, to keep the yard here, keep this as free of any outside decking, handrails, poles going to the ground, making it very tall in the backside. So it would be a lot of grading here. The grading I did away with was underneath this room. This was designed to begin with going back here, and I did away with that because of Public Works concerns of the retaining walls above it.
Thank you, that's helpful. And you can address anything else, but first, perhaps it would make sense to, it's going to not help our timing here, but does anybody have a question on this while he's here? No, okay. Go on. Going back down, if you have other things you want to say to us within your time, please do.
So again, as I was said before, I think working with the staff and all the consultants of the towns, we have developed a house that will fit good into the neighborhood. One of the concerns was drainage. I think in the staff's report, you'll see that we're taking, through Public Works, collecting the water and taking it down in sheets, so it'll sheet down to the creek instead of running through. So we're collecting it, taking it to a dissipator, and taking the dissipator down to the creek. So they feel that I think the minute report tonight said that his concern with the water, my driveway will correct it.
All right, your time is up, but let's see if we have any questions. Does anybody have a follow-up question, for example, on the drainage issue? Apparently not. So, thank you very much. I think we can now close the public hearing. So it is closed, and I'd ask for discussion and ultimately a motion. Commissioner Talaswar?
A question of staff, through the
Please.
chair. Could we talk a little bit about the cellar? Someone made a comment, one of the speakers made a comment about how the cellar is supposed to be in lieu of visible mass, and we're seeing some of it. Is there a ruling on how much you can see, or can you clarify that? Or so that
Well, there's not a
everyone is
ruling
aware?
on how much you see, but there's how you measure it.
How you measure it.
Yeah,
I'm
so I mean, that determination or analysis was made in reviewing the plans, but you can have it daylight at one portion and see the whole wall there, and that would still be considered a cellar.
I wanted that clarified out loud. Thank you.
Let me understand that, too. I thought there was some rule saying what part of the cellar essentially was not beneath the grade. I thought there was some way to count what
There's a
portion.
dimension. Yeah, you measure from existing grade, then it's the 4 feet. There's that calculation.
So if a portion of it qualified and a portion of it didn't, you would only take the cellar for purposes of not counting would only be that portion which meets the definition.
That's correct. And there's sections that might be able to visualize that. And so like a portion of a room, part of it can be a cellar and part of it can be considered a basement, and the basement is considered part of the floor area ratio calculations.
But here on the calculations, we apparently attributed nothing to whatever that level was. In other words, we accepted that as either as cellar. Is that right?
There is a line going through the bottom portion of the house, and part of that is considered a cellar. It's exempt from the FAR, and there's portions of that area that's considered habitable space. And it might be on sheet 8.
Is that included in the calculation of 2,500 square feet or 2,600 square feet?
Yeah, if it's not part of the cellar, yes, it is included as
So
part of it.
tonight, I'm saying before us, that is included?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Other questions? Is there a discussion? Is there a motion? It has to be one of those. Commissioner Bourgeois.
While we're thinking, I was wondering if perhaps we could get staff to comment on the drainage issue, if they've reviewed the drainage plan and their thoughts on the concerns of the neighbor.
Absolutely. Currently, the slope is draining toward the lot to the north with the driveway that's being proposed as is and a drainage system. They are collecting it and they are dissipated to the riprap area. So in reality, it's actually reduced the actual water that's draining to the adjacent lot, versus, with this proposal versus what it was before. Did that answer your question?
Comments? Yes, Commissioner Sayre.
Two questions. The first, a follow-up to that. With the proposed modifications in the staff report, does that also, would that also be something that would positively contribute to removing the drainage issues? Was that something that the staff looked at if you realign or reduce the auto court entrance?
If you reduce the auto court entrance, it does somewhat increase the drainage area that were contributing as it was before, because you're taking away the area that is draining back this way and collect it in its drainage system.
Okay.
And let it flow naturally like it was before.
Okay. And then the second question I have, on page 9 of the mitigated neg deck, it mentions, I believe, under hydrology and water quality, that as a condition of project approval, the town will prohibit the transport of any equipment across the creek, minimizing potential impacts resulting from stream disturbance by construction equipment. Just wanted to clarify that condition of approval is indeed in the conditions that are before us?
I'll check for you.
Okay. And the reason I bring it up was there was discussion about construction and how getting equipment across, and that just was something that caught my attention since it's in the neg deck.
Perhaps we can pause while she's looking that up. Let me suggest this. If we get to the point of making a motion, we can ensure that that's there. Which will also give her time to do that. But I think there may be another question.
Another
Commissioner Talasfor?
Thank you. A question about architecture, and that is, with the new, if this were to go back for a redesign, would the town architect once again review the architecture?
If it's major changes, yes, he would.
Okay, and are you anticipating it sounds like there would be some major changes?
Depending on what the action of the commission is.
Okay. And another question I had, were all the recommendations that the town architect suggested followed or incorporated into the new design?
Yes, they were.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions or comments? Yes. Commissioner Jensen.
Ms. Bailey, am I correct that in reading the staff report that the house as presented to us now complies with all the zoning regulations, height regulations, grading regulations, hillside standards, even though it's not in the hillside zone, and was reviewed for the 1991 subdivision requirements that Mr. Korb spoke about previously?
The house meets all town code requirements in terms of what's applicable to the hillside development standards. It can't meet the cut and fill requirements, and it can't be built within the least restrictive development area because there isn't a least restrictive development area. But we did address all the issues which would be applicable from the hillside specific plan to this site if it was required.
And a follow-up. And the question I had about the requirements that the Planning Commission put on the lot when the subdivision was approved, as I understand it, those are guiding the town's review of this project as well?
That is correct.
And it complies with those as far as staff is concerned?
We have interpreted that it has, again, the grading is, up for interpretation of which impact do you want. Do you want to reduce the mass of the house by potentially increasing the grading? That would be a concern. But yes, we believe we have addressed the intent and the directions of the subdivision approval.
Other comments? Commissioner Bourgeois?
And just to follow up on that, by increasing the grading, we're likely to increase tree impacts?
Potentially. Well, there's some trees that might be saved if you reduce the length of the house.
Mm-hmm.
There's some trees that might be saved in that area, but there are the 2 oak trees that actually are specimen trees, and so we would not want to impact those 2 trees.
Okay.
Let me make a couple of comments, too. This is a very, as you all know, and we're all wrestling with, a very difficult lot. And obviously it was approved at a time, sometime distant. One wonders how it might have been approved today. But once we allow us how it is an approved lot, it's part of the subdivision, and then we apply what our current rules are, it looks like at some point somebody could build a house there. So the question then becomes, which house? I wrestled a little bit with staff's recommendations, and it just isn't clear to me whether sending it back and trying to deal with this as staff suggests, at least as the possibilities, will necessarily make it better. We've heard very good comments from both sides this evening, and what you come away with is a very difficult lot. So I just want us to be sure that if we decide to send it back, we offer some good suggestions as to what it is we're looking for. And if, on the other hand, we were to approve it, we make sure that, as Commissioner Sayoc pointed out, that that condition you were speaking of and any other condition that we think is relevant gets included. So I'm not saying anything you all don't know, but this is a very troubling lot. Are there other comments? Commissioner Micciche.
And I'm having the same confusion, and I think that's why we've all been kind of quiet on this thing. But so I would ask staff, if I may, and Ms. Bailey, the statement that to reduce the mass of the structure. Could you be specific as to where that recommendation came from as regards to the specifically where on the house you would want that reduced?
The right side elevation.
Right side elevation. Okay. And do you see that being a possibility without moving the structure?
Sorry, a possibility.
Is that an architectural possibility there without moving the structure?
We believe there's a possibility of being able to move the structure.
Okay, so you have to move it to reduce that mass, you're saying?
You'd have to either push it into the hillside, and we'd have to see architecturally what they come up with, or you could potentially reduce the length of the structure. That would significantly reduce the house size, though, if you did that.
Okay.
And if you pushed it into the hillside, of course, you would, things we've just talked about, you'd increase the amount of dirt you had to take out of there and possibly threaten some trees.
Correct.
Commissioner Jensen.
Just for sake of moving this forward, I'm going to try a motion and we'll see what happens. And my motion would be to approve Architecture Inside Application S-04-64 and Negative Declaration -07-147 with the findings and conditions that are contained in the staff report in addition to the condition that is contained in our desk item, and provided it is not part of the conditions, the condition regarding the creek that Commissioner Sayoc just expressed for the record. The reason for the motion to approve is that, from what I've heard, this proposal, as in contrast to many that we get before us, actually complies with town code and height restrictions, setback restrictions. It apparently complies with conditions that were set back in 1991 for development of the subdivision. I personally don't think a three-car garage is necessary for any house, but it seems like the square footage of the garage is actually built over part of the house, and the alternatives for changing the house seem to require more cut and fill, which we do not want on a steep lot, may impact specimen trees, and there's already enough trees being removed from the lot. So I would not like to see trees impacted to experimentally move a house back. I think a 9-foot retaining wall is very high, and that I would ask that the town be very careful in what the design of that 9-foot retaining wall is and how it's built if this is to be approved. But it seems to me that the negatives that would come with the proposals that the staff has to reduce the mass on the right side would outweigh the benefits of trying to change that. So it seems like we would not want to have more grading. We would not want to jeopardize the drainage, which apparently is going to go away from the house down the hill. We would not want to move the garage because of the agreement that's been reached with the other neighbor to retain the historic rock wall, where they've reached an agreement regarding the right-of-way. So while I agree that this is very troublesome, it's a very difficult lot, and there are obviously problems with the development of it. It seems that since it seems like we're doing the best we can with the proposal that we have in front of it, and we actually are complying with town code to boot. So my motion is to approve.
Would your motion include the items set forth on page 10, making the negative declaration, et cetera, and you might want to state that? Did you already say it? If you did, I'm sorry, I missed it.
I'm sorry, page 10.
Of the report. Council advises me you may have already said that.
Oh, yes. I did try to include all the findings and conditions contained in the staff report, as well as the desk item.
That's fine.
As well as
You did.
Commissioner Sayoc's addition regarding the creek.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion to get comments going on it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there discussion? Commissioner Micciche.
I would ask staff, or even our town attorney, is there a way of protecting the neighbor concerned about runoff? The applicant has stated that he wouldn't expect runoff to be any more severe than the neighbor feels it could be. If it were to happen, would the neighbor have any recourse? Could we put something in to protect that?
Well, the project requires that certain drainage protections be installed in the project. That's part of the conditions of approval. They will be required to meet those conditions of approval in order to final the project. But if there is any problem in addition to that, that wasn't anticipated or that occurs subsequent to the approval or subsequent to construction, that's a private matter between the neighbors. We can't address it. But from an engineering standpoint of drainage, as you've heard from the engineering department, has been assessed, and they believe that the drainage concerns will actually be reduced because of the dissipators that will be set up.
All right.
Questions, comments? Commissioner Bourgeois.
Thank you. I'm not going to support the motion. This commission's usually not at a loss for words, and I think that goes to the difficulty of this site. You've got a fault line, you've got continuous canopy of trees, you've got a steep slope, you've got a riparian corridor. Very difficult lot, and I think we're all weighing all the efforts that we've seen you make in this design to accommodate everything, and I'm getting a sense that we're all kind of sitting on the fence on this. And we're talking about trade-offs of, the house as is or moving this or moving that. But there's another option that doesn't necessarily involve trade-offs, and that's perhaps we're struggling over this because maybe it's too much house for this site. Maybe it needs to be a little smaller. That would, I know that's probably not what you want to hear, but that might eliminate some of these concerns that we're all having. So I support staff's recommendations. And if that means that you have to lose some square footage, then I think maybe at this site that's appropriate. So,
Commissioner Telesfork?
I also, obviously, thank you, John, we're all struggling. But what I'm not struggling with is that that even though this is 2009 and the one commission saw it in 1991, what hasn't changed is the lot. And it was difficult then, and it still is difficult. And I can't go beyond that 2,500 that they recommended, because when I look at this today, I'm thinking that you will have to lose some square footage on this. And I would even go so far as to say to reduce the cellar or to eliminate it. That's how strongly I feel about it, because of all the other impacts that could still occur. So that's where I am right now, and so I won't be supporting the motion.
Other comments? Commissioner Sayak?
I also will not be supporting the motion, and basically the two commissioners that spoke before me have stated the reasons, and so for the sake of not repeating it, I'll just state that that's what I'll be doing.
Commissioner Jensen?
Well, I tried, and clearly the motion isn't going to succeed. So at least I put a motion on the floor, so I'll withdraw it now.
Well, before you withdraw it, could I comment on it? Because we do have the motion in a second, and what I think you'll probably find out is it probably would be 3-3. I guess, and the reason I want to say something is that we've all said it's very difficult because it is. I have a sense, and particularly after hearing all of this, that it's not going to get better. It doesn't occur to me that whether it has a cellar or doesn't have a cellar is the issue. It is true, if we had a substantially smaller house, some of the problems would go away. On the other hand, if he complies with everything, it's difficult to tell somebody who is in a lot that notwithstanding your compliance, we want you to build a 1,750 square foot house. So I guess if this were before us as a green field, I don't think I would have supported these 3 lots. It's just it looks like it's too many lots for this piece of property. But it was done in the past. So the only question I've got now is if we follow staff's recommendation and send it back. I've heard the responses of the applicant to what would happen if some of the suggestions happen, and I don't hear the staff really saying, let's go grade some more. So that, I think, is out the window. So it isn't clear to me what in the world the applicant is supposed to do, other than to spend some more money and take some more time and then come back to us. At some point, we'll either have to turn it down and let the town council decide that, or perhaps I'll be surprised and he will come up with something that will get at least a majority vote of this. So even though it does appear it would be just 3-3, I think it's important, again, just for the flavor of this, to get us all on the record what we're thinking. So that having been said, I think your reading of the vote is correct. It appears to be 3-3. So you're withdrawing your motion, okay. So let's ask for another motion. Commissioner Sayoc.
Okay, I'll take a stab at this. And certainly, Commissioner O'Donnell, I'm quite sympathetic to what you've said. And as what everyone has said earlier, it's a difficult situation. And because, at least for me personally, there are trade-offs to be made. And what is pushing me to the side of continuing the matter is that staff feels that there might still be an option available. And I'd like to exhaust those options before we move forward. And find that we did the right, basically make a wrong decision. So I would like a little bit more time to let's look at it one more time, see if staff can work with the applicant, and then have it come back. And if it can't come back, and at least for me personally, I know that we've looked at it another time, and staff has given us that opportunity. So my motion is to continue the matter to a date certain with directions to the applicant to reduce the mass of the structure and height of the auto court, as suggested in the staff report on page 9, or as other options that the applicant may find as they work with our town staff.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Commissioner Tallis, 4 seconds. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So I guess we have a unanimous vote with one commissioner not being present. And we need a date certain.
I think we need to ask when he thinks he can submit revised plans.
All right. If we could ask, I'll open the public hearing for a moment so we can find out, assuming you would help us pick a date convenient to you.
I haven't heard anything.
You have to come to the microphone.
And before you respond, let me just tell you again where we are. The motion simply is that the applicant consider the suggestions of staff or some alternative to address the concerns expressed by staff and certainly by at least 3 of the commissioners here this night. So I realize there may be a level of frustration here, but I'm just asking a fairly simple question. We can continue it to a date certain. We're trying to invite your input for what a convenient date would be for you. That's all we're asking
you. What am I supposed to do? Okay, you say you're going to continue it back to staff. I've come from staff for 5 years. So I go back to staff again. I haven't heard anything from any of the commissioners that says this is what we want staff to do.
I take your answer to be you're not going to need much time.
No.
So let's pick a convenient date to us, and we'll set it. So thank you very much. I'm closing the public hearing.
July 8th.
All right. I take it to the maker of the motion that the date is satisfactory and to the seconder. So I think we can just put that in the motion. All right. So that's the decision of the Planning Commission.
Anyone following the application, the matter has been continued to July 8th. There will be no additional notice of the public hearing.
Okay. There is no continued other business. Is there a report from the Director of Community Development?
No report this evening. Thank you.
Are there commission matters? Yes, Commissioner Jensen.
From our last meeting, I know that there was some discussion about a request for a joint study session with the town council, potentially regarding the issues that were raised last time about Los Gatos Boulevard, and I just wondered if there was anything happening with that or going to be anything happening with that.
Let me just say that the application that was accompanied by that recommendation has not reached the council yet. So they haven't, in fact, had a chance to discuss the specifics of the application or the concerns addressed by the commission at that time.
I do have one other comment to that, though. We did add into the staff report, we weren't sure if we really should separate the issues, but we went ahead and added into the staff report about the discussion amongst the Planning Commission members and that your request for a special study session. So it will be discussed on the...
Well, I don't know if it was mine particularly. I know that Commissioner Erickson requested it, but...
No, I'm saying the commission's request for, we added that to the staff report. So Monday night, I am sure we'll be hearing more on that.
Any other comments from the commission? Yes, Commissioner Johnson.
I don't know if this is the appropriate time to say because the last matter was just continued to July 8th. I know for a fact that I will not be in Los Gatos on July 8th, so I cannot attend the meeting. I don't know if that makes a difference.
I will not be in town on July 8th either. So we're getting into a vacation schedule here, and I guess it would be rather critical that we advise staff something about our schedules so that the staff can be aware of that. And I will do that right after this meeting, and I'd request, if you know, that perhaps you do that too. At the moment, it is continued to July 8th on the assumption that we'll have a quorum. Any other comments? The meeting is then adjourned.